What I want to show you today is a beginner-friendly tutorial on how you can get set up with Proxmox and actually something practical that you can do. And we're going to be covering everything from setting up Proxmox. We're going to be installing a virtual machine. We're also going to be covering Tailscale, my favorite VPN. So we're going to be going over that. And I'm going to show you how you can remote into your VM that you've just created using something called RustDesk and Tailscale. And then we're also going to set up an LXC container in Proxmox where we're going to be monitoring it all. So with all that out of the way, let's jump over to the computer and let's get started. There are three things you're going to need to get up and running. You're going to need some kind of a server or spare PC where you can experiment around with this. Now, ideally, you want it to have 4 or 6 cores because we want the Windows VM to be, fast enough. You're then also going to want Proxmox and you're going to have to create a bootable USB. Now, I don't want to make the video too long, so I'm not going to show you how to create the bootable USB. If you're here, you most likely know how to do that. What I want to do instead is jump over to Proxmox and show you how to install Proxmox and kind of some of the important bits when it comes to setting it up. And then we're going to go straight into configuring our VM. So if you've done everything correctly, this is where you should be. And it should say install Proxmox VE graphical. So we're just going to hit enter and we're just going to go straight into the installer. Now, the installer is pretty straightforward. There are just a couple of minor points that I want to point out when you're setting up Proxmox. Here, we're just going to sign our life away and agree. Then obviously select your hard drive. Now, I generally recommend to run it in RAID 1 if you've got 2 hard drives, but obviously we're just testing this. So by all means, just leave it as is. Now here, obviously make sure you set a super secure password. This is going to be the password that you're going to need to log into the Proxmox web interface. Now here's where you set your IP address. Now I generally recommend setting this on your router. And we're going to be doing this at the very end where I'm going to show you how you can reserve an IP address to make sure it's always the same. But I'm going to change it to .99. It just makes it easy for me. And the host name, the FQDN, I'm just going to leave it as pve.internal. That's absolutely fine for me. And I'm going to click install. I'm just going to wait for it to do its thing. It shouldn't take too long. And if you've done everything correctly, this is the screen you should be presented with. We can now disconnect the monitor from our server. We don't need to be connected to that anymore. And we can now go onto our web browser and type in the same address that you see on screen here. Now, for me, I've set it to 10.0.40.99:8006. And it is important that we add that colon bit at the end because otherwise we won't be able to access it. And here we are on the login screen. Now, the username is root and the password is obviously the one that you have set during the installation. So I'm just going to click OK. And you will, first of all, get presented with this pesky, you have no valid subscription for this server notification. It is really annoying. Don't worry, click OK because we are going to remove this. And we are going to do this with the help of something called ProxmenuX. It is an absolutely incredible tool. In my opinion, is an absolute must when you are using Proxmox. So let me show you how to do that. And I literally just Google ProxmenuX. And obviously, as always, be very careful with what it is that you are running in your terminal because not everything is safe. And it even tells you this when you're installing ProxmenuX. But I've got such an amazing experience with it and I absolutely love it. So I'm going to go ahead and install it because it just makes our life so much easier. So when you're on the GitHub page, you want to click on where it says installation. There's a little copy icon here. Then we're going to go back to our Proxmox instance here. We're going to click on PVE on shell, and then you are essentially in the terminal. And then I'm just going to paste it and hit enter and just going to go through the installation. Now it will just tell you everything that it's installing. So dialog, curl, JQ, ProxmenuX, and so on. So just give it time, let it do its thing. Obviously, depending on the configuration that you have, however many cores you've given it, it might take a little bit longer. That's it installed. And it tells you right at the bottom, says to run ProxmenuX, simply execute this command in your console terminal. So I'm just going to type in menu, hit enter, and there we are. We are now in ProxmenuX. Now, the first thing I tend to do is I tend to do the post install script. So I'm going to click the number 1 here, and then I'm going to do automated post install script. And I'm just going to click enter, yes, and I'm just going to let it do its thing. It'll go ahead, it'll configure everything, and it will install everything. It will update the Proxmox version, everything like that. So it's now gone ahead and did everything that it needed to. And it says, do you want to remove the Proxmox subscription banner from the web interface? And this is the initial banner that we saw. And I obviously want to do this. And it's going to go ahead and remove this. I absolutely love that because otherwise it's just going to keep prompting me. It's really annoying. And then once it's done everything, it should ask you to reboot if it's done any updates. And I'm just going to hit yes, and I'm just going to wait for Proxmox to reboot. So Proxmox has rebooted. It's pretty quick for me, and we are now ready to install Windows. And I wanted to show you how to install Windows because that's what most people are familiar with. but also Windows is a bit of a pain to install on Proxmox because there's a couple of things that we need to do. Now, the first thing, obviously, we need to download a Windows 11 ISO. It goes without saying, but go ahead and find a Windows 11 ISO that you want to use. And then the other thing you're going to need to download is you're going to want to download the VirtIO drivers. And these are kind of virtualization drivers, so Windows knows how to interpret the drivers and interpret the hardware that's being installed on, because otherwise we just won't be able to install Windows. So once the ISO has been downloaded, you want to click on local PVE on the left-hand side, and then it says ISO images, and here's where you want to select the ISO you've just downloaded. Now, in my case, it's on a file server. Now, I've done a whole video on setting up this file server, so if you're interested, go ahead and check it out. Here we are. I'm going to use this version of Windows. It's LTSC. It doesn't really matter for the sake of this video. But you have to upload those files first, so then Proxmox knows where to get them from. It's just much quicker that way. And in the meantime, you also want to go ahead and download the VirtIO drivers. Now, we will have a link to them in the description right below the like button, so go ahead and check them out if you don't know how to find them. But you essentially want to download this stable VirtIO Win drivers. And again, it's going to be an ISO. You just want to go ahead and download it somewhere where you know it is, similar to your Windows 11. So the Windows 11 ISO is uploaded. I'm now going to upload my VirtIO drivers. So both ISOs have been uploaded, and you can again check that when you click on local ISO images, and you will see both of them in here. I've got my Windows 11 LTSC and my VirtIO Win drivers because they're both going to be needed to set up Windows. So we're now going to cheat a little bit, and this is why I wanted to install Proxmenu-X, because Proxmenu-X is absolutely incredible, and it has a built-in feature to help us create VMs, and this is especially handy if you are new to all of this. And I know you could go straight in and kind of configure it manually, but sometimes you just want to get it up and running. So this is why I want to show you Proxmenu-X. So we're going to type in menu again. We're going to go to here, and then we're going to go to section 4, which is create VM from template or script. And here we can see create a Windows VM. Now we're going to hit enter. And then if you've uploaded the VirtIO and the Windows 11 VM, you should choose number 2, which is install with personal ISO from local storage. And it should find the Windows ISO. We're going to hit enter, and this will create a new VM. Now here we want to select advanced settings because you want to have a little bit of control over creating the Windows VM. So we're going to click advanced. It's going to ask you for the machine ID. It's largely irrelevant. You can leave it at 100. Now host name, we're just going to call it Win 11 test. This is just the name that's going to show up on the left-hand side in the menu. Now here, we want to select machine type of Q35. We want to use UEFI, and then here on the CPU model, we're going to select host. Number of cores. Now, obviously, this will depend on how much you have available. Now, I generally like to leave 2 for Proxmox, and then the rest I try and allocate to a VM. So in my case, because I've got 16 cores on this, I'm going to give it 8. That should be plenty for Windows for demo. Now, a RAM, very much the same. If you've got 32 gig of RAM in your server, by all means, give it 16 gig. The network bridge, leave as is. MAC address, leave as is. VLAN, don't worry about that. MTUs, we're not going to worry about that. Do you want to enable serial ports? No, not really. And then do we want to start VM after creation? Here is where we want to select no. Now the next thing is it's going to ask us for the disk type. Do we want to create a virtual disk or pass through? So if you had a separate disk on your device, you'd want to pass through that device. But in my case, I'm just going to select a virtual. And here I'm going to give it 64 gig of space. And again, very much give it what you have available, but you want to have at least something like 64 gig for Windows to kind of work properly. And then it's going to ask me, do I want another virtual disk? In my case, I don't want anything. And it's going to go ahead and set everything up. Now here, I'm just going to select a VirtIO. And here we can either have it download the VirtIO ISO automatically, the one we've already downloaded, or we can use the existing one. Now it's completely up to what you want to use. But in my case, to speed it up, I'm going to use the existing one, and it's already found it. And it's going to mount that for us automatically. So if we now take a look, it says next step, start the VM. When asked to select the disk, click load drivers and load the VirtIO drivers. And this is exactly what we are going to do. And then finally, once we're in Windows, we're going to have to install the VirtIO drivers all together. But I'm going to obviously walk you through all of this. So we're going to hit enter. We're going to go back to our main menu. I'm going to click return to main menu. I'm going to exit out of this. So on the left-hand side, you should have the Windows 11 VM created. We're going to click on it. We're going to click on console, and then we're going to click start now. And this should get us into the boot menu, but we're going to have to be hitting a key in order to boot from the CD because it still sees it as a bit of a CD. So you're going to have to keep hitting a space bar or enter, anything like that to boot from the CD. So we're now in the Windows 11 setup. So I'm going to click next. Keyboard or input language. I'm going to select United Kingdom because that's easier for me. Now here we want to agree and sign our life away. We're going to accept all the conditions. So here's where we're going to load those drivers, the virt.io drivers. So we're going to click on load drivers. We're going to click on browse. Now here's where you select the virt.io CD. We're going to scroll down. We're going to click on AMD. I'm going to pop that open, click on Windows 11, and then click OK. And here it's found the virt.io SCSI driver. And then we're going to hit install. And it should now find our 64 gig drive. And then I'm going to click next and hit install. And obviously now it's just going through the standard Windows 11 installation. So just let it do its thing and let it configure itself. So once your Windows installation is pretty much complete, you will be presented with this section here, which says connect to your network and install the driver. Now, if you click I do not have internet, it will allow you to set up a local account. But we are now in Windows here, and there's one more thing that we need to do, and that is we need to install all the drivers so Windows recognizes everything correctly. So you want to open the Explorer. And then you want to click on the virt.io drivers. And instead of installing all of them manually, they make it really easy for you by clicking on the virt.io Win GTX 64 one. We're just going to click on it. We're just going to work our way through and install it. And this will go ahead and install all the drivers, all the graphics drivers, and everything that we need to have a decently working Windows 11 setup here. So just let it do its thing. And I'll get back to you once this is done. It shouldn't take too long. Oh, there we go. Didn't even need to wait for that. So that's it done. Now, the next thing is the Windows 11 guest tools. I also tend to install them because that talks to Proxmox a lot better, or to whatever your host is. In my case, it's obviously Proxmox. And there we go. That's pretty much it configured. So we can now go ahead and restart this PC, and we have more or less done the Windows installation. So now that Windows is pretty much up and running and we can get into Windows, the next thing I want to do is I don't want to be having to use Proxmox to remote into it. I want a better system. And in my case, I want to set up something called RustDesk. And then once we have RustDesk set up and we know it works internally, we can then set up our VPN, and we're going to be using Tailscale in order to remote into this VM from outside of our home network. So if we needed to do something on Windows, for example, or we wanted to just showcase this, or this is a really powerful gaming PC or anything like that, we can remote in using the Tailscale IP that we're going to get. And this is why I like using a RustDesk. So this is how the whole thing comes together. So I'm going to download RustDesk here. Pretty straightforward. It's open source as well. There's nothing crazy about the installation. Just go through as normal as you normally would. Then we want to click finish. Now here, we want to go into the settings, and it's not the most user-friendly user interface, but where it says ID, you want to click on it. And then here under security, you want to unlock security settings. That's the first thing. And then if we scroll further down, it says passwords. And instead of having to look at this password every single time, this one here, because it changes every time it gets used, we want to set a permanent password so we can remote into this VM every single time. So if I go back into here, so you set a permanent password, and then we're going to hit OK. There's one more setting we're going to adjust in the network settings here. So if we scroll down, we've set the password, and there's one thing here that says enable direct IP access. And we need to enable this in order to be able to remote into it with our Tailscale IP. To find out the IP address, we can click open the terminal here and type in ipconfig, and we should see our IP address. And in my case, it is .146. So I'm now going to exit out of this Proxmox VM because we don't need this anymore, because we're now able to access this from RustDesk. So obviously on your main computer, you want to install RustDesk as well, just as you've installed it on here. So I've now got RustDesk open on my Mac here. And in order to remote into it, I need to enter the IP address. And I think it was .146. It should ask me for my password here, the one that I have set setting up RustDesk. And here we are in our VM. But the main thing is that we can now see the display. We are now going to be setting up Tailscale. Now, setting up Tailscale is honestly super simple. And the first thing you need to do is you need to go ahead and download the actual Tailscale client. Now, if you click on downloads on the Tailscale website, you can see all the operating systems that you can use it on, and it is pretty much universal. You can use it on your phone, so your iPad, your iPhone, Android phones, Android tablets, Windows, Linux, macOS, anything like that. Now, I've already downloaded it for macOS. Now, in order to set up a brand new account, it is just as easy. You literally click on login, and here you select your auth provider. Now, in my case, I use Google, but I'm going to set up a brand new account with Apple. So it'll ask you to sign in, so just make sure you enter all the details. And there we go. That's it. I've basically set up my Tailscale account with my Apple ID here. Now, the next thing I recommend is just clicking into the settings and clicking on user management here. And then where it says user approval, you just want to manually approve all users. And then under the device management, I do the exact same thing. It says manually approve new devices. And that way you have an extra layer of security where you have to approve the user and you have to approve the device that's joining your tailnet. But we've basically now configured Tailscale on the kind of client side. We now need to sign in. So if I open my Tailscale client and I click on login, it'll ask me to sign in here. So I'm just going to click Apple ID. And there we go. I've now connected to my telnet. And what I was just talking about there, I now need to approve this Mac here. And I now need to click approve. And if I click on machines, I can now see my Mac Mini here with its very own unique internal Tailscale IP address. Now, I need to do the same thing on Windows in order to join that also into this tailnet. So let me go ahead and set that up now. So I'm now logged in on my Windows PC and I've gone ahead and installed Tailscale, and let me now log in just so I can join it to my Tailscale network. So same as before, I'm going to click on sign in with Apple because that's how I've set up my account. And there we go. It's now asking me to connect this PC. And as before, I have to go ahead and manually approve this device. And if I look under machines, we can see both the desktop here with its unique internal Tailscale IP address and also the version of Tailscale, as well as the Windows version that I'm running, as well as obviously my Mac Mini that I've joined. And I've basically now got a remote access as long as Tailscale is running on both PCs. So I can remote in from the Mac to my Windows PC and from my Windows PC over to my Mac. And I want to show you that using a RustDesk. So I've now logged into Tailscale, and the thing I need to do is I need the IP address of that PC that I'm trying to remote into. And in this case, it's 100.116.93.61. That is an internal IP address. Nobody from outside of the internet can access this. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to open RustDesk and I'm going to paste this in and I'm going to press connect. And now it's asking me for my password that I've set earlier in RustDesk. So I need to go ahead and sign in. And there we go. We are now logged in and I can go ahead and sign into my Windows PC. And there we go. We are now remoted in. Obviously, the screen resolution is terrible because it is a VM, but I am now remoted in and I can access this Windows computer from essentially anywhere, as long as I said, both computers are connected to the internet and both have got Tailscale running. So one of the changes I recommend you make is while we're remoted into the machine you're trying to access is at the bottom right-hand corner, if you're on Windows, you'll see the little T with the dots. You're going to right click on that icon, click on preferences, and then it says run unattended. And this will essentially run even when the computer's logged out, because sometimes your computer will time out, you won't be able to log in, and then you're going to have a bad time basically. But whereas if this runs, and as it says here, it keeps it running when you logged out of Windows and even when the computer reboots. And this will allow you to then remotely log in, and you're going to get presented with the login screen. And there we go. I'm just going to click yes. So that now essentially means I can log into this computer even when it's restarted because of updates, or even when it's signed out. Somebody was using it and they signed out, and I can remote back in using my credentials, because otherwise I wouldn't be able to do that. Now, this is where we want to get to when it comes to monitoring our servers and all our devices on the network, all the important ones at least. I have configured Uptime Kuma here, and I've already added the devices in. So you can see my routers in here, my main Proxmox, my secondary Proxmox, my Docker container, and also checking whether the internet is up. Now, I've also added my Windows 11 VM, and you can see it's currently red. I'm going to go through all of this, but first I want to show you how to get it all set up. And we are going to be utilizing the Proxmox helper scripts again, or the Prox menu X. So back in your Proxmox environment, you want to go into your PVE, then click on shell, and then go onto menu. So you want to type in menu, then you want to hit enter, and it'll take us through to here. And then on number 6, we have the Proxmox helper scripts. So we're going to open those. And then literally in the top section here where it says search, I'm just going to type in uptime, and there we have Uptime Kuma, the container. And then do I want to execute the script? Yeah, and I'm just going to go through. Now here it's going to ask me to set it up with the default settings. I've just gone ahead and said yes. So it's just going to go ahead and create the container for me and do all the work for me. So it's gone ahead and configured it, but I've already obviously pre-configured it. And in order to see your IP address, you can click into the container, click on console, and then type in IPA, and it will give you the IP address here. Now in my case, it's 10.040.108. port 3001, because that's what Uptime Kuma uses. And then once you're in Uptime Kuma, you essentially just add all the devices into here. So if I wanted to check whether my computer's up and running, my Mac Mini here, and it's on a .100 IP address, I click on add new monitor. I would then ping it. And the reason you ping it is because you're just sending a signal saying, are you alive? And it comes back with a response saying yes or no. If it can't ping it, you get a red dot, which is what you can see on my Windows 11 VM because that's currently turned off. But if I now call this Mac Mini, if I put the host name, and this is where you put the IP address, it's 10.0.40.100 because that's my internal IP address. The heartbeat interval is how often you want it to ping it, and you don't need to be pinging it every second or every minute. I usually set it to something like every 2 minutes. And then you can also give it retries. Now, retries is a bit more advanced. I don't think that's necessary for the time being, but essentially it checks it, say, up to 5 times, depending on how many times you set the retry, before it gives you an error. So if I was to set this to 3, it would ping it 3 times before it says, actually, the system is down. I'm going to leave it on 0. I'm fine with that. And I'm going to click save. And there we go, my Mac Mini is up, and we can see that it has a green tick here, which means it has responded to a ping successfully. Now, the other thing I want to show you is the difference between a HTTPS monitoring setup, because you can either, as I said, monitor a ping where you just send a ping to a specific IP address, or you check whether the actual page is up. And in this case, you select monitor type of HTTPS. Now, the name here is my router, which is just the one I'm running, OpenSense here, which is this bit here. And then on the URL, you set the address. So it's http:// and obviously the IP address that you're looking to monitor. In my case, it's 10.0.40.254, which is the same as here. And essentially what this does is every 2 minutes, it tries to, as if it's trying to load the website. So it goes onto the website, it goes, yep, the website exists, and it goes, cool, thank you very much. And it either responds with a positive or a negative. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that your router might be up. So the website is perfectly well responding internally, so within your home network, but your internet is down, which means this isn't a good way to measure whether your internet is up. And this is where the final bit comes in, which is whether I'm checking here whether the internet is up. But I'm pinging nothing internally. I'm pinging an external IP address, which is 8.8.8, and that is Google's DNS server. And essentially what I'm doing is I'm checking from my home network, and I'm sending that ping to the internet to 8.8.8.8. And I'm saying, hey, does this respond? Is the internet up? Because if this was a false, that means either Google DNS servers are down, very, very unlikely, or I am not on the internet. And this is where you can monitor your internet. So this is how I've got it set up. I've got it set up to ping. I've got whether check the internet is up, and then I've got the host name obviously to 8.8.8.8. You can also use 1.1.1, which is Cloudflare's DNS. And then you can also check, I can't remember the other one, is Quad 9, I think, with all the 9s on 9.9.9.9. Now I generally just check Google stuff. Then I click save here, and then I can see the response time, so how long it takes to respond to Google's DNS servers, which, you know, it is not the most important thing for me, but the most important thing for me is to see how long the data has been up for. So I can, for example, go back through a week's worth of data and see whether there were any dropouts when it comes to the internet. Now, in my case, you can see everything's been running perfectly well for the last, 3 days I've been monitoring it. Average ping times and my uptime's been that. But if you're having a poor ISP, so if your internet provider sometimes tends to drop out, this is a great way to monitor it and then feed them back the data and say to them, look, I've been on the internet for the last month and this is how often I've been up. And I absolutely love Uptime Kuma because it is super, super simple, but it gives you just enough data to make kind of informed decisions. Now, there's a lot more you can do. If you look at monitoring types, you can monitor Docker containers, you can monitor DNS. You can do so much more. You can check, as you can see here, Steam game servers. You can do even a Tailscale ping. There's quite a lot of stuff you can do. Not going to go too in depth. I just want to kind of show you the basics because ultimately this is a bit of a beginner-friendly tutorial. Now, the final piece that we talked about is setting IP addresses, setting static IP addresses on your network in order for your devices not to jump around. So we're now on a router, and again, this is going to look very different for every single one of you because unless you're running OpenSense, your ISP will most likely provide you your router and it will look very different. Your options for setting and reserving IP addresses will be very, very different. But essentially all you're looking for is somewhere where you can enter the MAC address of the device and then match that to an IP address, and then that's how you want to essentially save it. Now I'm going to show you how I can do it on my system here. So if I click on leases, and I can now see all of the devices on my network here. So if I scroll down, I can see every single one of them that's got an IP address. Now, one of them is Uptime Kuma, which is .108, and that should show up here, hopefully. Yep, there we go. So we can see 10.0.40.108, and that is now set to this MAC address. This is a virtual MAC address. This isn't a real one. And I can also see on the right-hand side here that this is a dynamic lease type. So essentially what that means is that when it renews the lease, most likely it'll get 108, but if it does renew the lease, it might jump to another IP address if something else takes that over. So for me, it's pretty straightforward. I just literally click the plus button here. It already pre-fills most of the information here, gives me the MAC address, it sets the IP address. Now, if I wanted to change that, by all means, I could type in 10.0.40. I don't know, 101 if I wanted to, but I'm quite happy leaving it on 108. And then at the top, I can just give it a name. So I can call it Uptime Puma, like so. Leave everything as is, and then I literally just hit save and then apply, and that has now set that IP address or reserved it statically. So if I now click on leases, I can see that my .108 address here, which is my Uptime Kuma, and I've added that as my hostname, is now set to static. So that will now never change. And that is a super simple and beginner-friendly tutorial for you to kind of go from zero to really going a little bit more in depth with monitoring all your services, as well as reserving IP addresses and making sure everything is correctly configured. So let me know what you thought of this. As I said, I want to do a little bit more of an in-depth tutorial when it comes to Tailscale, because I know a lot of you have requested this, because I really, really like Tailscale. And again, this isn't sponsored. I just absolutely love Tailscale. But I hope you've enjoyed this little beginner-friendly tutorial. Let me know in the comments what you thought of it and if there's anything else you want me to go further in depth on. Now, if you're interested in finding out more and you kind of know all of this and you're interested in trying to get your services exposed to the internet, so if you've got a few Docker containers, I will leave a link to a video down in the description, because this is where I go over Tailscale a little bit more in depth and what you can kind of do with it. And also we're going to go over Cloudflare tunnels. So make sure you go ahead and check that out, because it is quite a good video to kind of go on the back of this if you're looking to expose a few Docker containers. But other than that, thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one.